Good evening. Welcome back to the Darkness on the Edge of Town Paranormal Radio Show. I want to thank you all for tuning in and spending your evenings here with us. Every Saturday and Sunday night from 9 p.m. till midnight, and you'll hear the best in paranormal talk radio. We delve each week into the realms of the paranormal and supernatural, everything from ghosts to UFOs, Bermuda Triangle, and beyond. This evening, our guest is cryptozoologist Lorne Coleman, one of the most prominent names out in the cryptozoological field, and certainly becoming one of our favorite speakers at our events, Tim. We've had him now at the Stanley. He's joining us here this weekend at the Queen Mary, and got a lot of great feedback on Lorne. And this weekend, we're going to actually have him talk about sea serpents at the Queen Mary.
Ooh.
Talking about, all the different...
Are we going to get hit by one at the Queen Mary?
God, I hope not.
Well,
I don't know if we do. I hope it's cute and its name is Cecil.
Yeah.
Yeah, the C6 sea serpent. But right now, let's join us back on the lines for a second event here on Darkness Radio, Mr. Lorne Coleman. Good evening, Lorne.
Hi, Dave. How you doing?
Doing great. Thanks for joining us here again.
Sure, it's good.
I wanted to follow up with you because we started off last week's news segment on Sunday. Bree Sanders was reading a story to us about a sighting of Bigfoot, and I guess there's this purported family of 4, and they actually, one of them left a fingerprint, and it's been tested and such. I'm just curious. Now, you had some insight on this story, and I was wondering if you'd mind opening up with that story and see what we can do to shed some light on that case.
Sure. Well, let me give you a little background. Probably unknown to most Bigfooters around the country, there's sort of a invisible college of colleagues across the world that are communicating with each other. Very, not secretly, but it's obvious we don't want, a lot of media attention. But one of the things that did come out of those communications with Russians and Canadians and people in France was that this family had found this footprint, found this fingerprint.
Right.
And they wanted some feedback from other people in the outside world, so to speak. So I put it on Cryptomundo and started talking about it. And what the background story for the specific fingerprint is that this family of 4 found that they were being visited by a family of 4, actually, Bigfoot. And they were doing things like leaving food out on a chair out in the yard, and that every time that the Bigfoot or the Bigfoot family would come closer, their cat would want to go outside because something's happened between the cat and the Bigfoot, in which it seems like the Bigfoot has actually adopted the cat. And so whatever is going on in terms of animal communication was really very obvious to the humans. And at one point, one of their cars, the SUV, was in the yard, and then they found that after one of these visits of a Bigfoot to pick up all of the food, that they found these fingerprints all over the car. And a police officer came out, was able to take the usual CSI kind of fingerprint, but he would not sign the fingerprint card and did not want it acknowledge that, through his name or through any kind of official record that he'd actually been out there to collect the fingerprint.
Right.
Because he did, there is a ridicule factor here, and he didn't want to be made fun of back at the station.
But you would think, though, that as an investigator, why would you be made fun of if you go out to try to disprove something or shed some light on it just even as a law enforcement investigator? Your job is to serve and protect. And if somebody's being bothered by something out there, whether it be a Bigfoot-type creature or a homeless family that's living in the woods, isn't it kind of important for the community to know what's going on?
Oh, I totally agree with you, Dave. But what happens, of course, are that a lot of these police officers come into these situations with preconceived notions, and their kind of internal critic, because of what's happened oftentimes back at the station, does get in the way of them really coming up with the evidence and putting their name with it. For instance, there was a situation in Florida once with the Mayaca photograph. And the reason I found out about it, it didn't really go through official channels, but after the police department down there kind of had some fun with it, they put it up on their bulletin board, and all of the animal welfare officers and the other officers were kidding about it. And then I found out about it through someone that took these things more seriously. And so I think that we may actually have a situation where many of these reports are really actually happening, actually being investigated, but so much fun is made of them, and so much, pre-debunking almost occurs that we really don't hear about them. And so it's kind of nice once in a while to hear that there are these things going on, that there has been an investigation, but we'll never see it in official records, and it'll never be in the press because it's quickly buried.
Now, do you believe, though, that this is an actual Bigfoot sighting that's going on?
Well, I'm not sure, because I'm very careful with these. They're called habitation reports. They're called Bigfoot contactees. And as you well know from investigating either, the frequent repeaters in terms of ghosts or the frequent repeaters in terms of alien contacts, we have to be very careful with the mental state of these individuals, with what they see in it for themselves. And one of the problems, of course, with a lot of these Bigfoot habitation cases is because the people don't want to be identified, because they are really trying to hide from the ridicule. The other side of it is that investigators like myself can only get so close because there's all of this anonymousness that's being kept between us and the family. So in this case, for instance, there has been a more forensic investigation of the fingerprint, and there's been some questions raised.
What type of questions are being raised on it at this point? Now, for those of you that haven't seen it, I believe if you still go to darknessradio.com and click on the news desk by Bree, I think there's a photograph of it there, or you can go to Cryptomundo and check out the website there, and you still have it up on your site as well, correct?
Oh, yes.
Okay.
And, Jimmy Chilcutt, who's this fingerprint expert from Texas that's been involved in a lot of documentaries on television and radio programs, he has investigated it, and he said that it looks to him as if it's a palm print in which the people that have taken it have done some kind of manipulation of the edges to make it look like a fingerprint. So that spells hoax to all of us that are hearing this. Additionally, there's some pictures that can't be released. These pictures that were sent to me quietly and behind the scenes show the fingerprints, the quote-unquote fingerprints, with a dollar bill. And what it really does indicate, as opposed to when you just look at a fingerprint by itself, it can be, little, it can be big, it can be blown up. With the actual dollar bill and the photograph for scale, I see that the fingerprints may indeed be children's palm prints. They may be other smudged fingerprints, but it doesn't give a good indication, really, that this is a gigantic hand that's been on the window of a car or a SUV.
Now, you mentioned, that there's kind of this code of different investigators that work all over the United States and around the world that kind of share these stories, and we'll talk about this. I know in the paranormal field with ghosts, there's this really crazy hidden agenda war going on between teams that don't like to share information, and there's, people trying to discredit other people in the field. Do you guys run into that in the cryptozoological field as well?
Oh, definitely. There are different camps. There are different schools. There are some people that only think that there's one kind of Bigfoot, but the one that I'm talking about right now is sort of an invisible college of intellectuals, of academics, and of people that are really involved with these contactees and habituation cases, where they really are put in a strange position because people are coming to them. They're saying they're having contact and frequent encounters with Bigfoot, yet the academics, of course, want evidence. We want physical evidence like footprints, fingerprints, photographs. And what happens over and over again are these people that are saying they're having frequent contact say, our cameras aren't working, or we can only get so close to them, or we're not going to give this evidence out because we're afraid you're going to come and kill them. And it really isn't a debating, hostile environment, at least that one. It's more a very skeptical one. Well,
now, we've heard about the dermal ridges on the footprints, which has been something that they think is helping to substantiate that these are real creatures and not just some guy out there with, 2 giant feet cut out of wood that he's stomping around in the mud and in the grass with. How often and how prevalent are fingerprints from Bigfoot? Well,
one of the things we have to be careful about the dermal ridges it's been quite well proven in recent years that the dermal ridges probably are bogus too, that they are indeed a casting artifact. In other words, you can kind of imagine if you're pouring plaster of Paris into a mold, into a hole in the ground or a footprint, it takes time for it to, really firm up. And as it's firming up, it creates ridges in that mold. And despite Jimmy Chilcutt and him still promoting dermal ridges, a lot of us kind of mainstream down the middle cryptozoologists have become very skeptical of those those dermal ridges. So the whole idea that they're then fingerprints, a lot of the fingerprints that are in some of the quote-unquote classic footprints seem to be put there by people who have pressed their own thumbprint into the toes of those plaster casts, those prints in the ground. So there's kind of a lot of debunking that's beginning to go on, and I still obviously consider Bigfoot a reality. I think there's enough other evidence out there, but some of this that's been being promoted down through the years really is coming under a lot of scrutiny, a very good scrutiny, and it's kind of falling by the wayside.
When we come back, I want to talk a little bit more about some of the rest of this case. We'll wrap up, and then we'll go on to some other cases that are going on out there. Our guest this evening is Lorne Coleman. He's a noted and well-renowned cryptozoological investigator, checking into claims of Bigfoot, sea serpents, chupacabras, all the different finds that seem to be popping up all over. We'll be back with more. If you'd like information on Lorne, check out his website at lornecoleman.com. That's LORENCOLEMAN.com. You're listening to the best in paranormal talk radio. Good evening. Welcome back to the Darkness on the Edge of Town Paranormal Radio Show. This evening we're exploring cryptozoology with our guest Lorne Coleman. Lorne, before we went to break, we were talking about the news story from about a week ago that we reported on our show from, I guess, your site about the fingerprint that appeared. Now, this family is supposedly being visited by four Bigfoot, a couple of adults and a couple of teens. Now, have they actually physically seen the family themselves, or is this just what they're assuming by the amount of footprints and things like that are on the site?
No, they say they've actually seen them, and they even speak about, in foggy terms, about a videotape showing the older male, being a black father, as they call him, and then the juvenile being a white male juvenile. So they've had these tapes. None of us have seen them. They just say they have them. But they report over and over again that their video cameras go off whenever the Bigfoot are around. So, there's even some inconsistency in that story, obviously, because if they have some fleeting footage, the cameras must have been working. So, it's just it gets kind of deeper and deeper, and until there's real evidence, until there's either some DNA or better photographs, it's just another eyewitness account that we have to be very skeptical.
Why do you think there is so much problems with cameras and video cameras being able to capture these creatures on video or photographic proof?
Well, I think that obviously most of these encounters are by chance. I mean, this is one in which they're saying that these creatures come closer to their homes, but even it takes two to tango, and it takes a human being or a bunch of human beings and a bunch of Bigfoot. And so those kinds of encounters don't happen that much. Humans are the ones in charge of the cameras, and they oftentimes don't have them ready or they're not running. And then we have to really understand that animals in general shy away from metal. They shy away from the special smells that are on human things like cameras or guns or things like that. And also there are a whole other level of noises, sounds, and kind of electromagnetic fields that are put out by human equipment, and animals are very good at picking up on that, of hearing it, of sensing it. And everybody knows about their own dog being able to hear whistles and sounds that human beings can't hear, and there's no doubt that that's going on and has been reported about deer, for instance, not coming near trail cams sometimes because the noises and the electronics that are being emitted. So I'm not at all too suspicious about that with regard to cameras. It takes a lot of good coincidence and chance, and also there are a lot of sounds and things that keep Bigfoot away from cameras.
in the past, I would agree with you on that, but now people, even most cell phones now have video capability that even if you're surprised, you should be able to pop up and capture 30 seconds to a minute's worth of video footage for your cell phone. Do you think we're coming into that environment where proof is going to start becoming more prevalent on video, or do you think because we've got all this technology available that it's actually going to be more detrimental because people can fake things so well on film now?
Well, many good points in what you just said, Dave, because indeed there are more of those cameras around, but have you seen any of the pictures they produce of moving animals?
Yeah.
They're horrendous.
Right.
And the gnome, the Argentinian gnome that's being shown all around of this creature that's kind of walking across the road. I mean, it's in backlit. There's not good definition. It could be anything. It could be, the neighborhood handicapped child crossing the road. It could be somebody in a costume. So, yes, there are more cameras around, but besides the fakes, which are kind of obvious, in a roundabout way that they may be there, if somebody has a camera and they see a Bigfoot cross the road, will it just be more confusing evidence, or will it really distract people thinking that they should spend so much time on it? We really need much better cameras and much more funding from museums and zoos to get out there as if we're hunting a gorilla or a
Isn't it funny, though? I know in the paranormal field, people whine and complain because we use these night vision cameras, which are grainy, and we capture something that's too speculative. You can't tell, blah, blah, blah. But whenever you capture something vividly clear, and I've seen a couple of pieces of video of Bigfoot that are so beautifully shot in high-def camera, they just happen to catch it, but it looks so good that it looks fake. People are like, oh, that's too good. That looks like somebody in a gorilla costume, and that's all it is. Just because you've got a really nice high-quality version now, that's almost people debunking themselves when they capture something like that. People are they're quick to dismiss if it's grainy, and they're even quicker, it seems, to dismiss if they have a really nice high-quality copy of whatever paranormal occurrence seems to be going on.
No, that's an excellent point, and it happens all the time. I mean, one of the problems with the Patterson-Gimlin film, the film that everybody knows about, shot in 1967, that shows this female Bigfoot crossing the creek, it's so clear, for 67, that many people have said, oh, that can't be real because I can actually see that she has breasts. I can actually see that there's muscle movement under the hair. So somebody must be in a suit. But, it does really go against, you almost feel like, and many of the people that are hoaxing are going out and they're shaking their camera. They're making it a little foggy so they can kind of be in that neverland between it being a crystal clear picture and it being what's called a blob squash. And you can't. Right. It may look like a rock in the distance. But you're right, and that's very true. And I think multiple witnesses is important. Having more than one camera from different angles would be important. So there's several things I think will be all put together, and I really think it's going to happen in Indonesia for the Orangay pindek, which is the little 4-foot-tall, hairy ape-like creatures that are being seen over there. They'll be discovered, and they'll be verified by photography long before Bigfoot, because there's so much skepticism with regard to Bigfoot. You'd have to really take one to downtown New York City, to the American Museum of Natural History, and show it to so many people in the media and everything for people to believe you.
Well, now, how come people aren't, I've noticed these motion cameras that people set up in the trees, like in blinds, and they'll leave them and then they come back and check it, and 4 days later there's just pictures of deer and raccoons and ducks and things like that. Why aren't they catching, if the Bigfoot, I understand, could hear the of the clock or of the camera winding up, that they might avoid the technological noises, but if it's just a box on a tree and they walk past it and it takes a picture when it walks past, how are they avoiding those type of cameras as well in supposedly heavily populated Bigfoot areas?
Well, they aren't heavily populated Bigfoot areas. A lot of these documentary companies and reality TV and even the weekend warriors, the six-pack Joes that go out looking for Bigfoot, not going deep in the woods is part of the game. And so they're putting cameras near roads, they're putting it near campsites. They're not really deep in the woods. You need to find a wilderness area, be able to hike in a couple days to 2 weeks, hike in, and then leave the material and the camera for 6 months, and then you might get something. That's how the mountain gorilla was finally discovered. That's how some of these recordings from some of these wilderness areas are recorded. They're in sanctuaries, they're in preserves, and so all of that we're seeing so far about Bigfoot are really, like you said, they're 2 to 3 days, 4 days that the camera's been out there, and in that amount of time, the human scent, the disturbing of the environment is all still pretty new, and you don't find animals that way. And they aren't heavily traveled Bigfoot areas.
Well, there's so many, with these type of cameras that are out there, too. Why do you think they're not just taking the time to go set them up deeper into the woods and do the correct... I mean, these guys spend so much time and personal money to investigate. Why wouldn't they do the right way?
Well, they only do it with regard to money only a little bit. If you look at most of the documentary film companies, and that's where most of the funding for cryptozoology, unfortunately, is coming from these days, they're interested in entertainment, they're interested in good pictures, they're interested in action. You don't make a documentary film or fund it if you're going to set somebody out in the woods for 6 months. It just doesn't happen. I know a man and a company, National Geographic and Animal Planet, 2 different companies that funded a guy going to Mongolia. They flew him all the way over there. They sent him out to the caves in Mongolia. He stayed there one night and came back, and they did a whole program on television about it. Oh. It's just ridiculous what's being set up.
Our guest this evening is cryptozoologist Lorne Coleman. For more information, you can check out Lorne's site at lornecoleman.com, LORENCOLEMAN.com. Get more information about cryptozoology and how to find Lorne at different locations. You can also find information there about his books. We're going to take another quick break. We'll be back with more talk about cryptozoological beasts right here on your home for the paranormal. Good evening. Welcome back to the Darkness on the Edge of Town Paranormal Radio Show. I'm your host, Dave Schrader, sitting across the board from me, Tim Dennis. And each week we explore the strange and unusual in the world of the paranormal and supernatural. You can tune in with us from 9 to midnight. If you miss any part of our show, we also archive the show. Click on the podcast section, and there you'll find all of our shows from August 24th forward. If you want to hear any of our older shows, including interviews with the ghost hunters, also Dan Aykroyd, different speakers like that, go to darknessradio.com. and click on the archives there. You'll see our last 2.5 years worth of archived shows on that site. So we've got all of the shows up and available for you to go back and listen through time as we've investigated all the strangeness that is our world. Our guest this evening is Lorne Coleman, and he's a cryptozoologist. Lorne, we were talking before the break about the different cameras and things that are going on and the lack of money that seems to be pouring into this field. It seems like they're spending a lot of money doing, a one-day videotaping, and then they come back and talk about what they found. As much money as they spend, let's just say one episode of National Geographic special for an hour has got to cost a couple $100,000 to produce, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's remarkable how much things cost, and people really watching the program don't know that. But
right, wouldn't it make sense then if they have that couple $100,000 to just buy a couple of really decent cameras that you can set up deep in the woods where nobody's going to be near them, and you don't have to worry about them being stolen, and then from that point,
No. I mean, look at Monster Quest, look at In Search of. The whole history of those programs is about entertainment. It's not about cryptozoology. And I don't fault them for that. They have different motives. They have different objectives. And cameras are stolen. People don't stay around. There would be a loss of interest if you had people out there for 6 months, because the immediacy of television, the immediacy and excitement is trying to be conveyed through these programs. So that's why they're kind of shooting in and out and trying to be action-packed. But most of us in cryptozoology understand that cryptozoology is really about 2 things. It's about patience and it's about passion. And most people that know me know I have a lot of both. And yet, you have to kind of modulate it a little bit to cooperate with documentary film programs, because right now they're the game that's being played, and you've got to kind of go along with it. I mean, some good things are coming out.
Right. Well, I get the fact that entertainment is number one, but I'll tell you what, if it makes sense for 6 months to put a video camera up there and we come back with real good footage, that, for National Geographic, okay, if we come back and say, after 6 months of setting this camera up in a tree and we've recorded out there, and I gotta guess that with our technology right now, we could put a GPS unit on the camera so that if it gets stolen, they can track it down fast enough and know what's going on with it. But if you've got this, wouldn't it be great for National Geographic to come out and go, we've set up on an original deal to try to find Bigfoot. Instead, we found 3 brand of deer that we've thought have been extinct for 200,000 years, and now we've got proof of that. I mean, that's still got to be an entertainment point to it at some point.
Yeah, but I don't think that's caught on as the objective yet. You have certain conservation organizations. It's finally coming around to that. They're finding out if they do a little research, even if they're in pursuit of a cryptid, and then they come back and they found a new form of deer that may not be as exciting as Yeti, that they're still going to get some kudos for that.
Right.
But it hasn't happened with television production companies yet. And I mean, I totally agree with what you're saying. It's just not there yet, and it's kind of slowly we're trying to.
Well, I know that they're also using thermal cam technology when children go missing. In
right.
The Cub Scouts, they'll suddenly start flying over the wooded area with thermal cameras, and they're able to locate some of these children. Has there been Bigfoot expeditions done using thermal cam technology that you're aware of, where they're actually going out and flying over areas that seem to have a high visibility of Bigfoot sightings, and seeing if they can track or find a den doing that?
Well, I certainly know that in the 1990s, in the beginning of some of the quote unquote documentary expeditions from the program In Search Of, whenever they tried to bring it back, they hired a helicopter to try to, with some thermal, flicker image, I think it's called. They tried to get some of those imaging, but of course, to have a very noisy helicopter going over a wilderness area scares, the rabbits away, let alone Bigfoot. But there is something that in that region, in that kind of realm, that has happened very quietly. Out on a reservation with the Sioux Indian in Pine Ridge, the tribal police out there had got a whole bunch of thermal imaging cameras from the Department of Drug Enforcement, the DEA, and they were able very quickly to start picking up some of these Bigfoot images, because out there they're calling them Big Man. That's just a local name for their Bigfoot reports. And I was talking to the chief. I was talking to a lot of people out there, police officers and local residents, because these reports were coming very routinely with a kind of a migration pattern that seemed to come at certain seasons. And yet the police told me, unfortunately, because they didn't have the extra funding, they were seeing these images, but they couldn't record them because they didn't have that part of the equipment from the federal government. So they needed $80,000, but we couldn't get the $80,000 to get the. So they were seeing, they were capturing the thermal images on their dashboard cams, but their cams were without recording devices. So that was very frustrating.
Well, is that something that we can set up? I mean, is there a fund, the way we can collect money for that kind of research?
Well, so far, we've tried different things, different organizations, different, journals, different museums, and different things like that, and it just doesn't come. People talk about being very interested. And of course, right now, it's absolutely horrible out there as far as the economic situation.
Right, but I believe Bushnell and Field and Stream, was it, Tim, or it was one of those two type of hunting magazines?
Those are false promotional things. I mean, I looked very deeply into that.
That wasn't real, because I thought it was like $1 million promise if you find if you can actually get a photograph of Bigfoot, and then they even encouraged you to do fake photos.
Well, you had to use their camera. You had to use. There was so many special footnoted rules that by the time you did it, and then it came out to it was only like $30,000, and then they started changing it around, saying you could send in your fake and hoaxed photographs, and we'd give some prizes for those. So it just got diluted, and it was real obvious it was nothing more than a publicity stunt.
But currently, they need. No, again, the skeptic in me comes up that, okay, if I film something on thermal cam, there's no real way to tell depth perception on thermal cam. There's no way to tell this. So how do we know that that's not, again, just somebody in a gorilla costume walking in the woods in front of the camera? Do you think that will just be the next line of defense of why people don't want to spend money in this and put it in there?
Well, right. But if some of the reports from the Pine Ridge Reservation where these things were 7 feet tall, and they could tell because they were coming up to the tops of the houses, which were of that height, 7, 8, 9 feet tall.
Okay.
So they were quite. To the police officers were very clear that they could tell the height of these things. It's just you just need to put two and two together and get all of the.
Well, now I know for our paranormal team alone, we've got a Razor thermal cam that we can hook to a recording deck, and do that. But you're
open-minded. Most ghost people say, Bigfoot? You've got to be kidding.
Sure. Well, no, I'd love to get out there and see what we can find on this to get it going. Do you think that it's stories like, there's the Beast of Bray Road. Are you familiar with that? The supposed werewolf?
Linda Godfrey, yeah.
Yeah, the Bigfoot sighting that's going on in Wisconsin that so many, prominent people seem to be witnessing this thing. Does that take away, and does that start to water down the field so people are like, oh yeah, now there's a giant werewolf, and now there'll be a were-duck, and it's a 20-foot duck walking around in the wilderness. Does that start to just dilute what you're doing?
Well, only up to a certain point, because if most people that are very serious about this field, if they start looking at Linda's reports and they start noticing the local lore, that what's going on up there is just a locally reported Bigfoot that's being called a werewolf. And so a lot of these local names tend to, have people think that there's 400 different kinds of Bigfoot around the world. But if you start looking at some of it, the regional names like Old Yellowtop in Coburn, Ontario, which is a Bigfoot with the yellow kind of blonde hair, or the werewolf of Bray Road, is really probably nothing more than a Bigfoot, leaning over, or maybe even some bear. And I've talked to a lot of people in that area, and they're really saying, well, we just decided to start calling it a werewolf for tourism and stuff like that. So, without kind of throwing out the baby.
Werewolf for tourism. I would think Bigfoot would be better for you for tourism than a werewolf. Werewolves do not have the best connotation in history for being something cuddly.
Oh, I don't know. There's a lot of people that are, into goth and vampires, and that's become very popular. So werewolves are in like Flint.
Yeah, that's true. We're going to take another quick break here. We'll come back and talk more cryptozoology with Lorne Coleman. At the top of the hour, we're going to be joined again by another Bigfoot hunter and hear about some of the new cases that he's been working on, have Lorne weigh in on that. And Lorne, again, the other site is cryptomundo.com. Is that correct?
That's true.
Okay, so the other way you can check out Lorne's information is going to cryptomundo.com. We'll be back with more right here on the best in paranormal talk radio, Darkness Radio. Good evening. Welcome back to Darkness Radio. I'm your host, Dave Schrader. With me, Mr. Tim Dennis. Tim, what do you take? We talk a lot about ghosts, UFOs, things like that. What's your take on the whole Bigfoot subject? Do you? I
don't know. If ghosts can exist, why can't Bigfoot?
I don't know.
I mean, if you're going to just run the gamut, and I know Lorne had said earlier that a lot of ghost people kind of poo-poo Bigfoot, and they do, and they do that with UFOs as well. In fact, I know of a few in our chat room who do that.
Yeah, exactly.
But the fact of the matter is if you're going to open your mind to the possibility of, spirits of people who have passed on floating around and talking to you through a recorder, then you have to leave something open for species that we haven't found yet. There are many different species we haven't either discovered, or we're discovering new species every day on Earth, and it wouldn't shock me if Bigfoot's roaming around.
I think there's probably a better chance of us discovering a Bigfoot than us finding a non-bitter ex-wife.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure about that too. Yeah.
All right, Lorne, we're gonna we have Lorne Coleman as our guest this evening, and he's a cryptozoologist. Lorne, speaking of video footage and such, there was a recording. I don't know if I'm sure you did see this a week or two back, where they caught the video of this thing that looked almost like a Bigfoot. But then they were thinking that it might be a bear with mange. It looked very chimpanzee-like to me, and I don't know if you know which footage I'm talking about.
I think you're talking about the one from Pennsylvania, which has been labeled juvenile Bigfoot. Yeah, most of the people that are really studied it, except for one group, and here again you get into the divisions and differences between groups, really do identify it as a juvenile bear, probably a mother. Because what they leave out in different showings of this is that in the frames right before that, there are 3 little bear cubs that show up in the video. So,
well, she just looks, or if it is a mom bear, she looks very emaciated and long front arms, that looked a lot more ape-like, I thought, than bear.
Yeah, on Cryptomundo, I talked about it when it came out earlier this year and compared it with photographs that we have of bears with mange, and it almost is an exact match. When they get that mangy look, they lose their fluffiness, and their legs look extremely long. They look very thin, and bears can look like different animals without the hair all over their bodies.
Well, do you think that maybe there's more to that than an actual Bigfoot creature? Could it just be bears with mange, or a different style of bear that we're just not familiar with yet?
Well, I think the big thing that's going on with trying to say that all the Bigfoot are bear is that most bear, and all bear except one or two reports that I've heard down through the years in the Appalachia area, all bears travel around on 4 feet, 4 legs. And almost 100% of the Bigfoot reports talk about a bipedal, an upright animal, crossing the road, being seen eating berries, bending down and getting fish out of a stream. So there's a real difference in the way that they look, and bears have a different proportion to where their arms are. They're very short arms, and Bigfoot arms are much longer, go all the way down to the knees.
Right, but with evolution, things are always changing. Creatures are always adapting. You've got, that lizard that just was a virgin lizard just had its birth of all these creatures that came, all of its babies, but there's no mate for it. Animals start to adapt and become asexual, that they can reproduce within themselves. If things are adapting, couldn't it just be another species that's slowly making the move from be like ape to human, bear to whatever the next level for bear would be?
Well, the difference with that is that if you look at the construction of the bear head, for instance, you have the ears that are pointed on top. You have a nasal area that comes out to a point. The evolution of bears is not in the direction of a circular head. It's more in an adaptation of them being faster, them being bigger, and that whole head area would never look like in profile like a human or a ape-like head or like a Bigfoot head. So it's probably not a bear. The evolution may be from some kind of primate or some kind of animal like that, but certainly not a bear. And people that know bears have never really put much stock in the skeptics' theory that all of the Bigfoot reports are bear.
What do you think we have a better chance of finding some point? Are we going to stumble upon a dead body? Are we going to stumble upon a hunter who killed one? Or are we going to get really good, serious video or photographic evidence of a Bigfoot first?
Well, I think we've already had, we have fecal material, we have hair, we have photographs. Nothing's really going to be, quote-unquote, proven until we have a body. And I've always said that I think it's going to be a lumber truck hitting one that's going to be the final proof. I don't think any hunter... we have already stories of people killing them. They get so scared after they kill one that they bury the body, burn it, or get rid of it because they think they're going to be charged with murder. Or you have hoaxes like
right.
the Georgia...
There was that story. We'll come back to the hoax in a minute. I don't know if you heard these guys. I heard them on another radio show that you can listen to coast across America. But there was another radio show. They were talking to this gentleman. And
Bugs, yes, I'm Phil. In Texas?
I can't remember where it was. I literally heard this like 3 or 4 years ago where he was out. They were out night hunting, and he shined, and this thing stormed him. They shot at it, and it took off, and they decided, well, we better trail it and see what the hell it was. And when they found it in this thicket, and the guy crawled through the thicket, and another one attacked him, he shot that at point blank range, and then realized he just killed a Bigfoot and its mate, and the Bigfoot had died in there, and they ended up burying these two, and then that's what their main thing was, that they're terrified that there's going to be some law in effect, and they're going to get screwed for But I mean, they were attacked. These things were wild creatures running at them.
It's a story. It's a story that has no proof. They said they were going to mark an X on a map and send that into Robert Morgan, who was the Bigfooter that was on the program, War to Art Bell. The guy never did that. The story circulates like Bigfoot folklore. It's just a story. It's fiction until there's proof, and it's a great story, and it's got all of these different elements, and people think that it's worth talking about and thinking about. But if you look at it, if you step back from it, it's nothing more than a wonderful, elaborate fictional story.
Well, do you think if it does come forward and they're able to find these corpses of a Bigfoot that were shot, Do you think that people do have a fear that they're going to go to jail for killing a Bigfoot? I mean, there's no official laws. Are there any real laws on the books? I think there is in like California or something, but that's like the only state I've been aware of that has something on the books that says it's illegal to kill a Bigfoot. Is there any rules or regulations anywhere else?
No, there are none. That one county up in Washington State, Sasquatch County, passed a law, and it expired, some years ago. It's just another part of the wrinkle that you hear is that people say they shoot it and then they get scared they're going to be charged because it looks too human-like because it's upright and bipedal and all of that. But there's absolutely no proof that these Bigfoot are human, that people will be charged with murder. The other thing that I hear, and we'll maybe talk about Black Panthers later, is that people say that they shoot these creatures like Black Panthers, and then they think that they've broken some kind of Endangered Species Act. So, you get all kinds of different reasons for why we aren't shown the bodies.
How much stock do you actually put in any of those stories being true? Do you really think that there is just fear going on that people are, they've got to hide it until they know they're safe on it? Or do you think at this point science would say, all right, listen, you killed one, we want to check it out, we want to see it, we'll forgive this crime, but now if we find that there is really a Bigfoot creature, now we'll enact a law to protect them. But going forward, you'll be safe. Go ahead, turn in the body, and going forward, we're but this is only if you truly have killed one in the past. We don't want you out hunting one right now.
Yeah, well, for instance, I think the bug story from Texas that was on that other station is just purely bogus, there's nothing there. Every time that I've read and heard or interviewed people that have shot something or can show me a body, they don't hold back. I mean, I investigated in Illinois for years, and people would call me up and say they have a body of a Black Panther, and I would go out and look at it. It turned out to be, a tomcat.
Yeah, it was just a tomcat, not anything of any major report.
Right,
right?
And as far as Bigfoot, there was a recent bear that was killed up in Alaska that the guy wondered what kind it was. It was a grizzly polar bear hybrid, and he could have got in trouble for killing the polar bear part of it, but he got off the hook.
Luckily, he only shot the grizzly side, right?
I think that if somebody shot a Bigfoot and really pulled the body in, you'd get a lot of different things going on to get people off the hook.
Well, let's take our final break for this hour. We'll come back at the top of the hour. We'll do more with Lorne Coleman. You're listening to the best in paranormal talk radio.